We are going to talk about pathways to scale impact. We are having with us in the panelists, we have an entrepreneur that already scaled one business, is now working on his business impact and how to scale it. We have a representative of the AIT to tell us how or what does it mean to scale impact in a research environment when you work with scientists. What does it take to spin it off? We have also the investor perspective, and we also have what support systems are out there, and we have a representative from the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber to tell us about it. We will start with a quick introductions of our panelists. We will have, I hope, a fruitful discussion. There will be, if you have a question during the discussions, please keep it in mind. We'll also allow time for questions towards the end. So each one, I hope we can take all the questions. I don't know how many questions we'll have, but we will try. And with that, so I'll just say a few words about myself. I'm Itai. I worked a lot in tech, so I'm mainly a product person, and I moved in the last years to Impact. Also because of my wife, Alexis, the co-founder of Impact Hub. And I'm interested in products with impact that we could scale. So where scale and impact coming together. So if you have something on that and you want to talk later, I'm open. And with that, I will let the panelists introduce themselves. So Silke, please.
Hi, good morning everybody. My name is Silke Vajargah. I'm the co-founder of Tilia Impact Ventures, which is an early stage impact fund. Actually, it was one of the first in the region of Central and Eastern Europe. It was founded in 2018. Now we are in our second fund, about 32 million euro. And we are investing in seed stage and both on the social and environmental side. Ticket sizes from 300,000 to 1.5 million in the first job with follow-on investments. Yes, that's about it, I guess.
Thank you. Good morning from my side. My name is Blahowsky. I'm at AIT, Austrian Institute of Technology, running the spin-off and entrepreneurship program. That means that we are translating research which is happening in the 7 tech fields into spin-offs and startups. Scale-up is for us a very important question. It really is starting with a very early subject decision. Where do we invest in our research activities? And at all of our research activities, we are focusing on a triple transition, new energy, digitalization, and societal change as a whole. And very excited to have this dialogue today.
Good morning, everybody. Really excited to be here. My name is Markus, Linder. I started my career as an entrepreneur. As you can hear, I don't have voice anymore, but I'm still trying to talk to you, so be patient. I started my career as an entrepreneur back in 2006, co-founded the startup Suvu. It's meanwhile a global market leader for AI digital sales assistants that has raised more than 200 million in capital. Then I handed over to a scale-up CEO who I brought in, took a year off with my family, traveled 3 months through the Nordics, learned a lot about the climate crisis, about the biodiversity crisis during that trip, and then decided to get active as an impact investor with Triple Impact Ventures. By the way, we have the same initials, you know, the two of us, TIV. It's really fun. But then also got active, so here with Triple Impact Ventures, we invest into startups in the climate, biodiversity, and pollution space at pre-seed and seed stage, up to Series A at existing portfolio companies. But then I also decided to get active again as an entrepreneur, contributing to solving the food space and the big challenges that we have in that space with Inoco. Inoco is a software as a service startup that supports grocery retailers and food and beverage brands to measure the impact of their thousands of food products and helps them to reduce the impact, to communicate the impact to consumers. And very much looking forward to this panel today.
Hi everyone, my name is Kambis Vajargah. I'm from the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, where I am together with my team responsible for startups and founders in Austria, impact innovation, social Enterprises, social startups actually play an integral role at the Chamber of Commerce. We try to actually support them as good as it gets, from pre-foundation to scaling up. Apart from that, I'm a former tech founder and also an active angel investor.
Thank you for the introduction. Markus, from your experience in scaling a startup, so can you share a bit about your personal story? How was the whole story? How did it start? How did you scale? What pitfalls you had on the way?
All the pitfalls. How many hours do we have?
Just intro.
Usually when you start a company, you try to identify a problem that people are willing to pay for. And that no matter whether you're just building an ordinary tech startup or you're building an impact startup, I did it the other way around. I started first with Subu, based on a technology insight, where I realized, hey, there's this cool technology, semantic web evolving, that could be so useful. And then I painfully started to search a problem, leading to a very long journey, which started with us launching a B2C product, where we launched like a price comparison platform that on top of it has digital advice capabilities, helping consumers to choose the right camera, the right TV in their language based on their needs. And we dramatically failed. We launched the platform and got lots of users, and they all disappeared very quickly again. And then a smart VC told us, hey, why don't you try to go approach it from a B2B angle, sell your technology to retailers who already have the audience, have the consumers. So we basically pivoted and finally found somebody who slowly was feeling the need to help consumers choose the right product. So I think one very important path, towards being able to scale was really, in our case, to first identify who would be potential customers who are really having an issue, having a problem, losing customers in that case who do not convert, and who have a willingness to pay. And even that story was very complicated because we started approaching very small online shops here in Austria who showed us in their books that they really cannot afford paying us 50 euros a month for our services. And we had to believe it because they were really too small. Started talking to Austrian large e-commerce companies who also were too small for us, who passed us on to their parents in Germany, where we finally found first customers. And a very big learning from that, and I think that's no difference when approaching an impact startup, is you need to have a customer who has a problem that's a big enough priority for them and where there is a willingness to pay, a business case. And I think that's something many impact entrepreneurs, including myself, tend to forget initially. Because also with my second startup, Inoko, I also came more from the planetary problem point of view and looked at it and said, oh damn, our food consumption is responsible for 30% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, 70% of biodiversity loss. That needs to be fixed, and I made the same mistake again. You see, I'm not learning, but that's okay. So I made the same mistake again. It wasn't a mistake, but I also started again from a consumer perspective with a consumer model. We created and launched an app that allows consumers to scan their grocery receipts and gives them feedback on how climate friendly was your purchase at Villa and Spar, and provide them insights in terms of the impact of the purchase behavior. Just to realize that the underlying business model, which was basically selling to green brands, green food and beverage brands, didn't really provide enough substance to fund the business. Which again led to pivot to B2B, where we finally found first initial customers, like large grocery retailers like Albert Heijn, the largest grocery retailer in the Netherlands, Mikro and others, who are basically using our technology to calculate the climate footprint of their thousands of food and beverage products in a consistent way, to communicate that to consumers, and who have the challenge that ultimately they need to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions because they have committed to very big targets there. They have CSRD and other regulation, also investors incentivizing that transition. They have the challenge that 95% of the emissions come from the products at the shelf. So, to make it short, either you're smart and you right away start your business with knowing, understanding who has a problem, that's a priority, who has a willingness to pay, or you need to, wiggle around, maneuver around, pivot your way until you finally found somebody who really, or not just somebody, but hopefully lots of companies who have this big issue. And I think that's really before we can even talk about scaling. And then there's obviously many steps that follow thereafter, we can also talk afterwards.
Thank you, Markus. So, two things that I noted. So, one, what is called in the product management, you mentioned very much the problem scoping, what is called. So, to identify the problem, define it very precisely in order to provide value to the clients afterwards, and then what we discussed about the pivoting in order to find the right business model, the revenue stream, in order to make it happen, or to generate revenues. Comparing these two businesses that you're running, what are the differences that you see, or you can mention, between an impact business, like now Inoko is an impact-oriented business, compared to Zoo, that was a tech business, was successful, but was not necessarily an impact-oriented one?
I think what I'm seeing is, again, important when we talk about customers, there's a little difference. There is nobody paying a green premium in the long term. I mean, yeah, there are some big corporations who do some PR projects where they, spend a couple of K on and that's all nice. But in the long term, there is no business who is able to pay a substantial green premium in the long term. So, in both cases, you need to have that real need, pain, and priority in place at your customer. But what is very much different is if you look at it from an internal point of view, if you look at the team. So we have a very vision and mission-driven team at Inoko, which lots of people who get up in the morning and are really passionate about solving that huge societal problem that we have, or planetary problem that we have. And that really gives us a lot of resilience as a company, because in the tech space, you're in this constant war for talent, where people leave, hop from one job to the other. Whereas in our case, people are really willing to accept lower salaries, accept lots of downs, a lot of punches into their face every day, and stick with us and go through this with us, even also through the hard times. And that's a big difference that I really see between a conventional tech business and an impact-driven business, which really gives us a huge edge and kind of counterbalances all the hard battles that we have to fight on the outside.
Okay, so from what I hear, what you're saying is like mission creates commitment, or higher commitment in the team.
Yeah,
that's the main thing that you're saying. Better in AIT, when trying to spin off or to bring from the lab to market research projects, what additional elements or what are you seeing from your perspective in the AIT?
Well, I think we have to differentiate how do we understand scaling, and I would like to bring two examples. We have, for example, one spin-off who introduced a new biotech into soy seed in order to reduce fertilization, for example, with nitrogen. So it's strong impact. Now, the question is, when we designed the founder's journey, we asked ourselves, okay, where is mostly soybeans produced? And we targeted our patents in this direction. Total patent cost 150,000 euros because most of the soybeans are produced outside of Europe. So clearly the scale-up process from the thinking point was we have to address the global market. Everywhere where soybeans are produced, this technology can be applied. This is one kind of scale-up. The other kind of scale-up is if we are introducing technology to secure energy grids, for example, in order to avoid things like what happened in Spain just recently. We're introducing 40,000 renewable energy plants in the next years in order to promote the energy transition, we need secure grids. And there are only 17 companies in all of Europe who are designing and making sure that these energy grids are stable. So this is a complete different kind of scaling, a very small scaling with very high impact. If, for example, something doesn't work in the energy grid, we all suffer. So that kind of scaling we have to consider in our founders' journey, and we have to design and the founders' journeys and the paths of these startups accordingly. That's basically sort of one of the way of thinking about that.
Thank you for the answer. It actually exactly leads me to the next question to Silke. Silke, when you are assessing an investment case, how do you prioritize between impact and financial return?
We first of all always look at impact. So we start on this side. So we look at we have some screening criteria for impact. And if we fulfill these criteria, so let's say it's good enough to start with, because you never know when you start the process of assessing a project where you end up, right? But you get a basic idea what problem is the startup addressing. Is it addressing one of the SDGs, which is the condition, of course? And then something you mentioned is commitment. Are we aligned on impact? So is this an impact-driven founder? And it's extremely important, I think, because at this stage you invest in people, first of all. You invest in people, and these guys are at the starting point of their journey, and they will have to take tough decisions. And unless you still stay committed to your mission, it may lead you somewhere completely else. We try to invest in so-called lockstep model. That means in businesses where the impact is increasing, developing with the business. But in today's world, to be frank, with any technology, you can do whatever, accelerating, but it can get to what we call a mission drift. So we try to avoid it, but I think at some point in time you have to take decisions. Going this way, which is more maybe financially is interesting, or we want the impactful. So being aligned and true to your mission is very, very important. So we look at the founders, we look at the impact potential, we have some minimum criteria, we will talk maybe a little bit later about this, which problem does it address, and what is the solution, is it really contributing to, let's say, solve the problem. So that's at the beginning, but once we have decided, yes, we meet very early with the founders, with the team, or our partners, and then we look very much at the business potential. And, we have a balance between both, so it's essential, and I mean, that's purely mathematical, and everybody knows that. If you create a portfolio, at this stage of the companies, there's a high risk that you will lose majority of them over time, so every startup has to be a fund returner, let's call it this way. To return the money with some, something more to your investors, right? So that's the mathematics behind. So you have to have a certain, let's say, multiple of your investment at the end, and that's the perspective you look through. So then you look, of course, is there product market fit already? That's the stage we ideally invest in. And of course, it doesn't matter if that turns out to be a failure and you pivot, that's fine. But at the point when you talk to them, you want to see that there are customers, retention is important, so it's not only that you deliver something to these customers, but they come back because they love you, what you're doing, right, your product. So you have to see these signs, and you have to see a vision where they want to get to. And of course, a go-to-market strategy. You look at very basic things at the beginning, like how much costs you spend to acquire your customers, what's the long-term value of your customers, so your churn rate and all these things, and that has to be okay as well. So first priority I would say is impact, but the other part has to be okay as well.
Is there a minimum threshold of return that you expect? So let's say if we kind of put a checklist.
A sort of, yes, because of the mathematics of the fund, as I said. So yes, we look at every startup, and there is a minimum return expectation from our side. It has to fulfill, which is an assumption, right? It can turn to be very different at the end. But you look at financial models, or you make a kind of financial model, and then you decrease the numbers, let's call it to a conservative level, where you believe you are comfortable with, and that has to deliver a certain return monthly. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And one more thing regarding the impact. Are you also looking, when you assess the investment case, at some impact model? How do you actually measure the impact? Do you prioritize, for example, wide and narrow compared to deep and compared to
No.
wide and shallow compared to deep and narrow?
I understand the question. Impact can come in very different ways, especially depending on which problems are you addressing. I mean, if you look at everything that's just connected to the climate crisis in terms of technical solutions, and it might be in energy, it might be in mobility, even in agtech, it has always an outcome, it's decreasing of emissions, right? And it's sort of, there we make a minimum assumption. So we always say, well, the project has to deliver a decrease in emissions of 100,000 tons over the lifetime of the project. It's a minimum requirement. Because sometimes it looks nice, but if you look in detail, you know, it's quite different. And then we look very much in detail during due diligence, what are specific of the projects, and it's really reachable. Because sometimes you get a number at the beginning of the company because they made their own calculation, their own guess, and it turns out to be quite a different story. So we look very much in detail on due diligence on these things as well. But on the social projects, it's a bit more difficult, of course. It's not so easily measurable. And yes, we say at least 10,000 people should be somehow affected by the solution. But it's very general. We are looking at education, we are looking at healthcare system, and always say the accessibility is an important criteria. So we break this down in every sector to criteria which has to be fulfilled. So we have a deep dive into education, for example, and say, what is an ideal project for us? As an impact investor, what do we want to achieve in this sector? So, and based on this, you know, we are making our investments. And then you have the moonshoot projects, which are more in the direction what you said, which are more close to science, and we are doing such projects. And then it's sort of more difficult to assess the outcome. So it's more wild guess, but that can have systemic change because these kind of startups are often changing entire systems, right? Which is great. So we love to look at them as well, but of course it takes a lot of more expertise and which we are getting mostly from outside experts. But the impact potential might be huge and it might be very deep, or either way. So it's probably both in this case.
Thank you. Markus, from your head, because you have the same initials, like the impact fund.
Yeah.
Silke, would you like to add some points from your side?
Does this work?
Otherwise, you can pass.
Take this one.
Take this.
Oh, okay. Thanks. So now putting on my TLV hat as well as Triple Impact Ventures hat. Our investment focus is more narrow, so we invest into climate, biodiversity and pollution. So on the climate side, it's quite easy. I mean, you can calculate the emissions that the team is or should be able to save if they succeed. On the biodiversity side, it's much more, nuanced and broader. So we don't really use a framework in that sense to say, hey, let's calculate and so on. But it's really usually like a back-on-the-envelope calculation of what's the potential impact if this scales. From that perspective, I think we approach it in a very similar way. I think what's really important is that we really only invest into models where we see a one-on-one alignment between the impact that the company can achieve and the financial returns. And we very strongly believe that for us, it only makes sense to invest into globally scalable potential category leaders that have both, right? Because it doesn't. You are not going to be able to create impact at global scale without building a company that has returns on a global scale. And building the next Tesla, I hate Elon Musk, but I mean what Tesla achieved in the sense of pushing the whole automotive industry to electrification, that was really systemic change, and that's what we need to achieve, or what startups need to achieve in many, many other areas as well. And there is no disconnection between financial returns and impact. And I think if you look for models that are, business models that work like that, you don't really have to deal with that questions a lot. I mean, I agree with you that there's always situations where in some cases, some startups might have a tendency to pivot, and that's why I agree with you that it's so important that you really look at the founders, talk to them, understand whether they're really impact-driven, and whether they really want to change, or they just want to, build the next whatever unicorn, no matter what purpose. But yeah, we don't really have the issue in practice that our portfolio companies would at some point and say, okay, impact doesn't work out, let's do the next whatever B2B, dating platform or a B2B SaaS marketing platform that just helps companies to sell more crap. We don't really, up until now at least, have not seen that in practice.
Thank you, Markus. Kambis, from your perspective, what support system or what support do you provide for startups that want to scale, and more specifically for impact startups?
Sure. So I will start with something I see in practice, because what we do is we consult a lot of different founders in Austria, but also internationally. And the younger the teams get, the more they focus on right from scratch how to actually integrate and implement creating impact with their business model. That's something we can see, based on education, a different kind of culture, or how they are being raised up, etc. So the younger they get, the more they focus how we can actually strategically integrate impact into the business model. And at the Chamber of Commerce, we have our founder services, startup services that are actually all around Austria. So in each state, we have people who serve upcoming founders in their path actually to set up the business, scale up the business, etc. And what we do is actually, first of all, show them the possibilities that are in Austria in terms of regulation, in terms of funding, in terms of public grants, etc. So it's a lot about servicing them, educating them, etc. Apart from that, together with organizations like Impact Hub or SENA, we have created a guide for actually social enterprises to actually show them the path actually to success. This is something we do on a regular basis, and we want to actually push this forward and actually even extend it. Also something that happened in the last couple of years, Austria being one of the very few countries who have this, is a verified social enterprise label. It's actually, you can apply for it, it goes through the Austrian Promotion Bank, also the Vienna University of Economics and Business, and it will be handed over by the ministry. And that's also something we work together to actually verify what is a social enterprise and what is not, based on the data they provide. So for the first time, it has been standardized how actually a social enterprise is defined. These are a good basis, but I think still we can do much more for this kind of entrepreneurs and startups, and looking forward actually to support them even more.
Thank you. One more question to all of you. In what industries do you see the most potential for making impact in scale? What are the key industries? If you can, list one, two. I can share that I'm exploring the health tech at the moment, personally.
Can I continue?
Yeah.
So we get a lot of data actually, and let's think about Austria. What has been the #1 vertical in terms of investment for startups last year? What do you think? Any kind of industry sector you have in mind? AI, in terms of technology. Yes, in terms of technology. Energy, very good. It was actually, I think, #2, #3. #1 was real estate. So real estate, including construction technologies, which is actually one of the industries that produce a lot of CO2 emission, actually the largest amount. That's actually where you can do a lot of change, also by using tech like AI, deep tech, etc. That's just one example. So there are others as well, but real estate is one of the verticals I see actually the biggest potential for change.
I agree. We work very intensively in circular economy concept of the future, and as you know, 2040 CO2 reduction in the construction industry is coming, and most of the companies have to think about how to build in the future. And yeah, many open questions.
Well, I think it's difficult to say because the question was where you can achieve most impact, and I think it's nearly in every sector. We see a lot also in new materials, of course, construction materials, not only construction. And then you see new ways of producing food, which is, can have a huge impact, proteins-based, and fermentation, what's all going on. And then you have these mutual projects. We have invested in one, which is producing, meat from the lab, cultivated meat. Once going to market, can, this 30% of emissions can also solve. So I wouldn't reduce it to an industry. It depends on the character of the innovation behind, and I think it's nearly everywhere you can have these disruptive things happening, right? Even education, I would maybe, Anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you, Silke. I think it's really about the founder market fit. So I think the area where you can achieve the most impact is the area that you are truly passionate about. Because, you will run into so many, fist. I mean, you're gonna go through such a hurtful journey when you start up your business. That you will only survive if you're truly passionate about what you're doing, if you truly believe in the mission that you are on, and ideally, if you already have some kind of network and know-how represented in the team, in the area that you are tackling. And I agree with Silke that there's opportunities in so many areas. I mean, we invested in building a life cycle assessment startup that's doing extremely well in the energy side with green hydrogen certification, very active in the food space with various startups, and it's really always about having this fit between a founder who is deeply driven by making an impact in that area, the expertise, and then executing on that.
Thank you. So we've been talking a lot, we got some information, I hope, food for thoughts. I would like to open the stage for questions. So if you have a question, go ahead, raise your hand.
Thank you very much for your remarks. Just focusing in a bit on the climate side of things and climate investing. And if I look, in the past kind of 15 years, and a lot of the wealth that's been generated from the investment side and VC, a lot of it's B2B SaaS, or this is kind of a model that's well understood in terms of how you can return the fund or how you can make a lot of money in that kind of space. And there are a lot of opportunities in B2B SaaS in the climate space as well. But I'm wondering also how you're looking at the split in terms of opportunity between the software side of things and then also the hardware and the deeper tech side of things, which has kind of like a different investment profile. And it feels to me like some traditional VCs or traditional investors are struggling to wrap their heads around. So to what extent are you looking at that versus the software side of things, or is it both? Is there still lots of opportunity in software? Just wondering kind of how that looks to you.
Maybe from the hardware side, SaaS solutions, of course, are major CO2 producers nowadays, with streaming services contributing significantly due to the energy utilization. So the fundamental question is, how do we compute in the future? So these are very fundamental questions on how do we scale down energy consumption per calculation. And of course, everybody is working on photonic applications in the area of high-speed computations. But these are ground challenges which I think only can be solved on a very big scale. Not individuals, in my opinion, but the requirements are definitely there that all our resources, especially now with AI utilizing so much energy, we need to come down if we want to continue to use such models on a B2B solution.
Very briefly, I think it's not all these projects, especially if you mention hardware, because I know it takes a lot of capital, needs maybe different sources than VC funds, right? So it's not everything is for VC funds. So that's first thing. It's too big, and it's an execution thing more than the product. And but deep tech, yes, and I think it's always important if you look at a deep tech project which comes with something new, how they spend the resources they have. because they need normally 5 to 10 times more capital at the beginning to come up with something which we call a product, right? So before that, it's about outsourcing a lot of things, using stakeholders, resources, partnership resources, that you don't produce everything at the beginning in-house and so on. So I think we would look at this and we love to do this, but then it's really important that you look what's the business model here, right? So to define their business model in their space and not trying to set up heavy capital or intensive things very much at the beginning to test things. That's a no-go.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the capital intensiveness of the startup or the envisioned or planned or foreseeable. Because as an early stage investor, if you invest into very capital intense businesses, you need very deep pockets because you need to be able to follow on over many rounds, because else you're very likely going to be diluted. You might have down rounds where, if you cannot chip in at that stage, you're just wiped off the cap table or behind a very massive waterfall and no chance to ever see returns of that investment. But there are also other models that have hardware components that are not massively capital intense and still, have massive potential. And we try to do like a mix. I mean, we definitely invest more on the B2B software side, but we also have a couple of bets, as you know, on that side. And it's going to be interesting to see how many of them are going to work out. If it's one, I'm already very happy. Because it's obviously very challenging, very tough. But in the end, we need hardware to solve those crises. I'm sure that some of these startups will have massive returns and will be very successful, but you need to have a portfolio strategy on the one hand, but in our case we also have a split in terms of how much to invest into B2B SaaS or similar models versus hardware, deep tech, we will see if that was a smart strategy or not.
Do you want to add? I mean, a lot of responses. Any more questions? Yes.
Thank you. This direction so you can see me. Hi, my name is Lina, and thank you for all the very interesting insights. I have a rather critical question, maybe, because when we talk about scaling impact, but also scaling companies, right? Especially in this, not only, but especially also in the deep tech sector, we are also talking about branches which are still relying on very extractive techniques, right? Because, I mean, you mentioned Elon Musk and Tesla. I mean, electric cars are depending on mines in often indigenous territories or in territories, it's not that it's only shiny and good. So when you talk about scaling, and especially scaling impact, in how far do you also think, maybe beforehand or maybe in the process, of the other components? I mean, of course, we can talk about degrowth then, also it's a buzzword, so maybe not. But in how far are those...
talk about degrowth.
Yeah. In how far are those topics that are that you consider in your daily work? Thank you.
Maybe I start. What we are trying to do is to look also of the negative things we are, causing with our investments, right? So we always do, I mentioned it before, a risk section, and that's very important because let's face it, we have always positive and negative impact somehow. I'll give you an example. Last year or so, we had a startup which were producing some kind of hardware, automated things which were able to, in the sewing industry, t-shirts, which was so far impossible because of the material, right? And the impact mission was, let's abolish jobs in the sweatshops in Asia, right? Yeah, exactly, that was their point. And there was first excitement when I said, okay, so what these people are going to do then, right? Once their jobs are abolished. Fine, we don't have sweatshop. And it turned out, if you take a second look, they go into the grey economy with no insurance, with nothing, and it's getting even worse, the social situation. And then, of course, they will also import this technology because textile industry is important for them, but they are not yet there. So is it a good investment or not from an impact point of view, right? So yeah, we try to flag the risks from the impact side from our investments.
I think we look at the same side there.
Great.
And yeah, another argument I think was there to reduce transport. Transport obviously is in reality a very minor part of the impact of the fashion industry. But back to your question. So for us it's also important to really look almost at the whole life cycle and whole impact of the investments. But it's simply not realistic. I mean, whenever we consume, whenever we produce, there will always be a negative impact. Unless we move into caves, we will always generate negative impact. Even a deer that runs through the woods is killing other species and is having a negative impact in that sense. So it's not realistic to expect a company to only achieve positive impact on this planet. So it's more about, comparing the new way of doing things that they are working on in comparison to the status quo. I'm also very much, like a train driving person on the night train again tonight to Germany and really trying to minimize my impact. But we also need to be realistic. I mean, we need cars to transport medicine, to transport blood, to transport our food. And you cannot just, completely switch everything to trains, and you still have the last mile problem. So I think we just need to look at it more at what is the impact of this technology in comparison to the status quo. Is it a massive move into the right direction? And then look at, what are the other risks and what can we do to mitigate them and to reduce the negative impact and over time. But I think we need to be realistic. And that's the way I see it.
Any more questions?
Yes, we can talk about degrowth.
So to follow up on that question, because we were in the same session actually yesterday about the indigenous in Brazil. And if we take the Tesla, so okay, great solution, it's electricity, okay, we reduce emissions and so on, but actually, from the other hand, we have the mines there, so we really take advantage of those indigenous people, the resources, natural resources and so on. So it's like, okay, we make impact in one side, but the other side, you are actually, it's not a status quo, but you're actually making a significant negative impact. How do you, when you look on the impact of companies, how do you assess that? How do you look at it? If it's a zero-sum game at least, or what's your take on that?
Well, what I described right now, we flag the risks, and if they are too large and we can't mitigate them, then we wouldn't invest. That's it.
Yeah, I would like to add, I mean, we worked on a startup manufacturing battery cells in Austria. Very difficult subject, high capital, and with our objective, of course, to produce battery cells in a humane and eco-friendly way. It has a price point at the end of the day, and the question is, does your market hypothesis go positive? Can you find customers who pay for a safe supply chain? You can design supply chains which are clean, but it has a price point, and the question is, does this market hypothesis come true? And we will find out.
And is it
And
priced
it has to be,
Is it priced in?
It is priced. Can we price it in? And of course, having a complete systemic view on the entire impact you're producing with your spin-off, which we always have to do. I think the starting point is that you have to be aware about all of the impacts which you're doing. And then if you can mitigate it, it's another question. But at least the awareness, I think, is a good starting point to design it. What, do you agree?
Yeah, no, but first I think it's the same. I mean, we would look at, what is the positive impact of a startup. It definitely needs to be massive progress. It needs to be massive net progress that startup can generate. And if that's not the case, we would pass, but still at those startups where we see that huge progress they can make, we still would look at how can we mitigate the negative impact they make and also make progress there.
Thank you. To close the session, we are like in the last minutes, I would like to ask all of you, like I always like that someone, like the audience will take something with them, like a food for thought. So do you have any tip, lesson learned, a key message that you would like to transfer to the audience as a takeaway from this session? You don't have to, only if you have something in mind.
If you're planning to build an impact startup or an impact business, go for it. We need everyone in this situation in which we are on to try to have impact at scale. Choose something that you're truly passionate about. You will need a lot of energy, you will get a lot of rejections, you will hit a lot of walls, right? And you need to be incredibly endurance to make it in the end. But that's part of the process. So don't expect that things will be easy. But it's an extremely satisfying and exciting journey if you wake up in the morning and know that you can work on something that has the potential to really change things on this planet. And that's massively rewarding. And yeah, I can only encourage you to do so, to bring along a lot of patience and endurance, and you will be able to make it if you really deeply believe into your vision, and if you gather a complementary team around you that's as excited as you are about this topic.
I would like to agree with that very much. All our spin-offs, all our startups, all our founders are very thankful that we mitigated them in direction, we facilitated it. I have no spin-off currently where the founders came to me and said, oh, this was a big mistake, I never should have done this, quite the opposite. Thankful to the fantastic support system, and of course the painful lessons they have to learn along the way. Nevertheless, all of our spin-off founders have this impact in front of them. They're scientists, researchers, they turn into entrepreneurs. At the end, the motivation is impact and a better future tomorrow. And I would just say, let's do this together, definitely.
In recent time, I had discussions with different types of investors who believe that investment into ESG, climate, etc., is actually decreasing. It's not so relevant anymore, etc., because of geopolitical change, because of different administration. I wouldn't count on that. I would stick focusing on creating impact, on working in the climate space. Keep on going with your mission. Not just be opportunistic and try to actually scale up your next AI startup or whatever. Focus on what you really believe and continue to do so, because it will not decrease, actually it will increase even more over time.
Well, I would maybe say just start, because I think we have such a culture of being afraid to fail in our region that most people even don't start. So, and once you start small but think big. I mean, if you plan to scale, it has to be already in your product design, a scalable product. So, big dreams is important. Don't, hold you back on this. And your mission, and stay true to it. Because once you stay true to what you want to do, your vision, you will attract the right people, talented people. You share with them the values. And it's also important if you select your investors, to be aligned with them. So you stay true to it, and everybody will come in and join you on this journey and support you. So I think it's important. And once you scale and decide to go for outside funding, cash is king, be always on fundraising. It's also what I quite often see that people underestimate it.
Thank you for all the words. So, find your mission, start small, think big.
And keep going.
And keep going. Thank you. So I'd like to thank all the panelists for the inspiring thoughts, all the food for the thoughts, for sharing all your experience with us. Thank you for the audience, for being such a listening audience. And for your
Great job.
And for your questions. So, thank you very much.